Thank you, Lonnie. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alejandra Orate. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an advocate with Disability Rights California. Brief visual description. I am a Latina woman with medium length straight brown hair. I'm wearing clear black glasses with a brown sweater, and in my background is a DRC logo. Today, we're going to be presenting on regional center services. But before we get started, I would like to talk a little bit about DRC and what we do. As some of you know, we are a nonprofit agency that is federally mandated to provide legal services for people with disabilities. We work on various issues like regional center, special education, health, social security, just to name a few. Presenting with us later today is Attorney Daniel Hernandez. He will be joining us at the latter part of this presentation. Next slide, please. Before we get started, I do have to give a brief disclaimer that this following presentation is meant for education only and does not constitute legal advice nor counsel. Your situation may be unique and require careful attention. Keep in mind that the information in these slides could become out of date as the laws and local practices relating to these matters can change over time. Next slide. A brief description of this slide. The image depicts a map of the state of California that labels most of the regional centers across the state. Counties are grouped in different colors, such as red, yellow, green, pink, blue, gray, purple, and orange that correspond with the catchment area of the respective regional center. So the Lanterman Act is a California law that helps people with developmental disabilities lead a productive life in the community. This was passed in 1977, and here we've linked the Welfare and Institution WIC code for more information on the Lanterman Act. Next slide, please. In this image, there are three people sitting down in front of a table and looking at a laptop. The people have brown or black curly hair and are dressed in business casual clothing. There's glasses of water on the table, and the background has a door and a bookcase. So the purposes of services and supports from the regional center are to help people with developmental disabilities live like others without a developmental disability of the same age. These services and supports can help lessen the effects of the developmental disability. They can help them be as independent as possible and to help them learn new skills. Next slide, please. Okay, so the regional center has three main priorities, one of them being safety, community access, and remain at home. For minors, we see that it is their main priority to remain and allow minors to stay and live at home with family. Next slide, please. So for this picture, it shows a group of 4 individuals in a bright, comfortable setting, 2 adults smiling with 2 children sitting on their laps, curly hair, and a checker shirt. So the regional center services, or the regional centers offer certain services for anyone. These services must be flexible, creative, innovative in meeting the person's individual need. We will talk a little bit more about services in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So this picture depicts a handwriting with a pen on a document on the table. Regional centers do provide a wide array of services for individuals with developmental disabilities. You can find more resources on the links above and also look up vendors and the services that they offer. So we've included here an example of a vendor search where you can find the services that each vendor offers, their contact information, where you can reach out to them. Next slide, please. This image features 3 stylized figures interacting with large pink letters spelling service, with one figure gesturing and another using a laptop. What services do the regional centers offer? So as I mentioned, the regional center does offer very flexible, creative services to people with developmental disabilities. Those can include respite, transportation services, diapers, behavior services, ABA, camp and social recreation services, daycare. But for more detailed information or questions that you may have related to the services that you can access, we've included a link here to our rights under the Lanterman Act chapter, and you can access this here specifically for minors. Next slide, please. This image shows a joyful scene in a forest with a person smiling while holding a dog and a child. What services do the regional centers offer? Like I mentioned, camp and social recreation. As of July 2021, regional centers can now pay for these services. These can include social recreation activities, educational services for children's ages 3 to 17, and non-medical therapies. We're going to talk about family support in the next couple of slides. So like I mentioned, respite, daycare, diapers, emergency and crisis intervention, special training for parents of children with developmental disabilities or parents with developmental disabilities that need training, adaptive equipment, behavior training, communication devices, communication intervention are some of the services that Regional Center can offer to you. Next slide, please. This image displays a green sign with the word service in it in bold white letters against the blue sky. Some important considerations for services is to make sure that you are seeking generic resources from Medi-Cal, school, or any public agencies first before making your request for a service or support. The regional center is the payer of last resort and will focus on whether it is needed to lessen your developmental disability. If it's already in your IPP, which is the individual program plan for short, IPP, if another agency can provide it, like I mentioned, Medi-Cal or school, and if it is the least costly alternative. Next slide, please. So like previously mentioned, these agencies can include Medi-Cal, school, to name a few. That is considered generic resources. Generic resources is when any agency receiving public funds with legal responsibility to serve all members of the general public. That's when you can exhaust generic resources first before going to the regional center, as they are the payer of last resort. Once you get denials from, let's say, Medi-Cal, school, in-home supportive services, then you can take those denials to the regional center to show the need for your services and supports from them directly. Next slide, please. Again, so generic resources, they are provided, regional centers are prohibited from purchasing any service that would otherwise be available from Medi-Cal, like I mentioned, Medicare, in-home supportive services, or IHSS for short, Department of Rehabilitation, school districts, private insurance, or a healthcare service plan. Just a brief description of the slide. It's a colorful graphic feature. The text says how to apply for Social Security child benefits in letters red, blue, and yellow. Next slide, please. So the use of generic resources, the regional center is the generic targeted case management provider. There shouldn't be any gaps in service, whether you're transitioning, whether you're moving regional centers to a different catchment area. The purpose of regional center is to provide also gap funding. This means that they can pay for services for something that you are pursuing, whether that is you're looking for ABA therapy through your insurance, but you're still waiting that, and they told you that they have a long waiting list for an assessment or ABA providers. The regional center can gap fund while you are either pending that therapy or IHSS, in-home supportive services, if you're in the process of applying for that and you're still waiting for the assessment, insurance approval, like I mentioned. So yeah, that's something that they are supposed to be providing, gap funding. Next slide, please. Natural supports. Natural supports are those who are part of your life. They can include family, like mom and dad, friends, and they are those who help you meet your needs for free. So families will use the resources first before asking for services of supports. And this slide includes an image of a family of 5 sitting on the couch. They're smiling and laughing. Next slide, please. So it's important to note that although the regional center will purchase from the least costly provider, they can also purchase highly cost services or supports to prevent restrictive settings. So just because something is not of the least costly doesn't mean that the regional center shouldn't pay for it or that they will not. You just have to ensure that those services and supports are the only service and support that can meet your needs. Next slide, please. In this picture, you'll see a medical professional with an individual smiling. So there are no vendors, right? You ask for a service, let's say you ask for ABA, and there's no vendors that can provide the service. And the regional tells you, well, there's nothing we could do. There's no vendors to help you. So you've requested that service, you've exhausted the generic resources to going through your insurance, going everywhere else, but they're saying no vendors. They are obligated to help you provide those or to help you receive those services and supports. And they can do so by looking for vendors and other catchment areas from other regional centers. They can also look for similar service vendors and even ask the Department of Developmental Services to fund to develop a new program of services and supports. So just don't take no for an answer from them. Next slide, please. This is an image of a yellow sticky note pinned to a corkboard featuring the text IPP, that stands for Individual Program Plan. So next slides, we'll talk about POS, or the Purchase of Service. The Purchase of Service policy, it's also known as the Guidelines for Purchasing Services and Supports. It explains the requirements for receiving the services, and it sometimes sets limits. Each regional center's guidelines vary. Next one, please. So the Purchase of Service policy, you can find that on your regional center's website, or you can ask for a copy of it from your service coordinator. I will say that some are more readily accessible on their website than others, but like I said, you can always ask for a copy from the regional center. One of the things that we do want to encourage you is to look at the Purchase of Service policy when you're asking for a service or support. This will help you identify if, one, this is the service and support that you or your loved one needs, and if they meet the needs for that service or support, and if they don't, maybe it's another service that would meet their needs better than this one. So it gives you a lot of detailed information on what each service provides and the guidelines to be able to receive that service and support. Okay, next slide. So I will be handing it off over to Daniel Hernandez. Like I said, he is an attorney with Disability Rights California, and he will finish off the rest of the presentation. Thank you, everyone. Daniel, you're muted.
I was muted. Okay, great. I'm not muted anymore. Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Hernandez, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm a staff attorney with Disability Rights California, and I've been with the organization for about 3 years. In my role, I conduct outreach, I develop legal clinics, and I engage in direct client services in various areas that Ali mentioned. Now, to ensure accessibility for folks joining us who are blind or have low vision, let me provide a visual description of myself. I'm a Latino man with black hair and a black goatee. I'm wearing a maroon polo shirt with small zigzags running across it, and my background is blue with our organization's logo in the corner, the top corner. Now, now that my colleague Ali Wright has reviewed information about generally the Lanterman Act, the regional center system, services that can be offered, and purchase of service policies, let's talk about something known as the individual program plan and the related process. Again, throughout the presentation, when we refer to the acronym IPP, we're referring to the individual program plan. All right, so let's talk about the process, right, of an IPP. So an IPP is a contract between a regional center client and the regional center. And this is specific to California regional centers. So a consumer or client and the regional center, right? This document is like a roadmap, let's say, that outlines the goals, the strengths, the needs, and the specific services that are needed for people with developmental or intellectual disabilities in order to help them achieve more independence and a greater quality of life. So this individual program plan, in a later slide, we'll discuss a bit more about the actual IPP document, but it lists all of the services and supports that are provided to regional center clients. And many of you are probably familiar with individualized education programs, sometimes known as an IEP for special education students, or you may even be familiar with individualized plans for employment, sometimes known as IPEs for clients of the Department of Rehabilitation. So IPPs function in the same way, where an entity has a legal obligation to provide a person with an intellectual or developmental disability supports, right, to help them achieve their goals. Now, a regional center client will be assigned a service coordinator once they're found eligible for services. So they sometimes call this individual a case manager. And this person is a key contact for regional center clients and their families. So they help assess needs, they help develop the individual program plan, and they connect the client with necessary services. And in a way, they act as an advocate to ensure that the plans are being followed and reviewed regularly. Sometimes when you want to modify a service or a support that's in the individual program plan, or if you want to request a new service, you can ask for an individual program plan meeting, which has to be held within 30 days of requesting it. So generally, right, these plans are reviewed every year or every 3 years, but if there's a need, you can request a meeting to review the plan as soon as possible or within 30 days of a request. Now, at the bottom of the slide here, we have reference to the words, the phrase person-centered plan. And this is actually very important. This means that the individual program plan or IPP is driven by the client's own goals and choices in their life. So it focuses on that person's strengths and what's important to them. It doesn't focus just on services that address deficits. This is all a collaborative process where the person, their circle of support, and the regional center team, they all work together. But ultimately, right, the client, the regional center client is the person that directs the conversation because they're the ones that can define their future, including where they want to live, where they want to work, and how they want to interact within the community. So now, my colleague Ali, right, mentioned the various services and supports available to regional center clients. Because an individual program plan is person-centered, like I previously mentioned, the needs and preferences of the regional center client or their family are vital. They're very important. And here on the screen, you'll see a link to the law. It's called the Welfare and Institutions Code, Section 4646. And this governs a process of developing and carrying out an individual program plan or an IPP. So under this law, the planning team needs to consider the following. We have a few listed here on the slide. First, the service options proposed by the IPP team, right? Those have to be considered. But again, the focus needs to be on the client's needs, their preferences, and their personal goals. In certain situations, right, the family is part of the decision-making process, particularly as it relates to children, or if you have an individual who's under conservatorship, or if there's a power of attorney, there's going to be a group that can be part of the decision-making process. So that has to be considered. Something else that has to be considered is how effective are the options in meeting the individual program plan goals. And as Ali mentioned, right, what must be considered is a least costly option. In other words, the option has to be cost effective. And going back to what Ali mentioned about generic resources, which is part of this assessment, I want to speak a little bit more about that. Something important that we like folks to keep in mind is that these options are specific to a client. So what may work for one client will not work for another. So the least expensive option may not be the most appropriate sometimes. And let me provide an example. And we'll talk more about services later. But let's say that a regional center is considering placing a client in a licensed group home. And the other option is for the person to receive supported living services. Now, let's say that the first option is least expensive. It's less expensive than receiving supported living services. That doesn't necessarily have to be the option, right? Placing the individual in a licensed group home. If an individual's individual program plan or IPP, if there's a goal for them to live in their own home with support in order to maximize their independence and to help them integrate into their communities, the regional center can't deny supported living services simply because our group home is cheaper. And again, the plan is client-centered. So the individual's goals or preferences are always going to be the key factor in determining what services are going to be provided. Now, another important aspect of the individual program plan process is that the process has to take place in the client's preferred language and also consider a client's need for alternative communication if necessary. Okay, go to the next slide. Allow me to provide a description of what we have on the screen. We have an image of four children that are smiling together in front of a chalkboard. They're wearing colorful t-shirts that are red, blue, purple, and pink. And graduation caps are drawn on the chalkboard above them. Again, an individual program plan meeting is a discussion with the regional center service coordinator to develop, to review, and to update the IPP, whether annually or every 3 years. So during this meeting, what is exactly discussed? Here we have a list of a few. First, we have hopes, plans, and goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time limited. And an acronym that is used to describe that, to help people remember, is SMART or SMART. S standing for specific, M standing for measurable, A standing for attainable, R standing for relevant, and T standing for time limited. And in a bit, I'll go over an example of how that would function. But let me go on to the next points on the slide. So what else is discussed at the IPP meeting? A person's disability-related needs, right? And how the needs will be met with services. Also, what's discussed is the amount of service and the range of dates or timelines. Also, what's discussed is who is a responsible party for services and funding. And lastly, what and when each goal will be accomplished. Now, going back to the first point where I mentioned that goals have to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time limited. Let's go over an example. Let's say that a client has a goal of living more independently in their own apartment, and they want to learn how to cook. That's a goal. So let's break it down using the acronym I mentioned, SMART or SMART. So again, the goal has to be specific. Here, the specific goal is that the person will learn to prepare their own food safely, but also focus on basic cooking and safety skills. Now, how can this goal be measurable? Let's say that the goal involves a person successfully preparing 3 different types of meals. Let's say a sandwich, pasta, and scrambled eggs. And they'll be using a stove and microwave with minimal support from another person. So that's how we can measure that goal. Now, how can that goal be attainable? So the planning team, right, can fund, or the regional center, I should say, can fund a community cooking class or secure a support person to provide training at home in order to build these cooking skills for the client. Now, the question is, how is this goal relevant to the goal of living independently? That's simple, right? Because mastering meal preparation is a critical step toward living independently in the community and in making healthy choices. And lastly, how can this goal be time limited? We can say that the person will complete the cooking course and demonstrate an ability to prepare the 3 meals within 1 year. So again, these goals have to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time limited. Okay. Now, on the screen, let me provide a description of the image. So on the right side of the slide, you see the first page of an individual program plan document. It has a section that provides basic information about the client, including the name, the unique client identifier, known as a UCI, which is just a client number, date of birth, the meeting date, and other relevant dates. There are also some sections displayed, including the introduction, a section on how the plan was developed, the client's vision for the future, and communication needs. So let me provide a bit of context. So in 2023, a law in the state of California was passed. It was known as Senate Bill 2, I forget the exact number, but it's a law that resulted in changes to various regional center processes, including individual program plans. So as a result of this law, a standardized IPP template was developed that's now being used by all regional centers across the state. It features a person-centered, uniform approach, and it's designed to be more clear and accountable. And another change was that it's now written in the first person. So words like I, me, or my are used when drafting the document. And again, that's all to make sure that the plan is person-centered. And here on the slide, we have the first page of the IPP document, but there's other sections that are not included here, such as decision-making. So if there's arrangements for decision-making, like conservatorships, powers of attorney, supported decision-making, that has to be detailed or included in the IPP. There's also sections like emergency planning, also services and supports, which is very important. And that's where we are provided specific details for the services that are going to be provided. There's also a section known as acknowledgements, which is a review of a person's legal rights and resources. And of course, there's also a signature section where all the relevant parties have to sign. Because again, this is a contract. Let's say it's a legal document that carries legal weight. So as part of developing this new IPP template, the Department of Developmental Services has provided a lot of videos, tools, and information about the new IPP template. And here on this slide, you'll find a link for your reference that will take you to those videos, those tools, and information. Now, let's say that you have applied for regional center services. You were found eligible. And now you're going to head into your first IPP meeting. So what are some things to consider before attending that IPP meeting? And here we have a few tips. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, meaning there's many, many tips we can provide, but we list a few of them. So the first one, if necessary, a client has a right to record an individual program plan meeting. So if you want to record the meeting, you have to notify the regional center in writing at least 24 hours in advance of the meeting. Now, if the regional center wants to record the IPP meeting themselves, you can object to that, and a person has that right. However, if you do object to the regional center recording an IPP meeting, you're also prevented from recording that meeting yourself. And this is because the law wants to make sure that there's fairness for all parties involved in the meeting. But again, a person does have that right to record the meeting if they'd like, with advance notice. Now, another tip, right? If you don't record the meeting, you could also bring a support person or a note taker. And this is helpful because a person can take notes of the discussion, and you'll have someone else that can recall what was discussed or agreed upon. A person also has a right to have a decision maker present at the individual program plan meeting. The law says that there must be someone at the IPP meeting who can make decisions on behalf of the regional center. Um, and this can be someone like a service coordinator, a supervisor, or another regional center administrator. But let's say you're at an IPP meeting and a decision maker is not present. You have the right to stop the meeting and ask that a decision maker be present. And the regional center at that point must hold another meeting within 15 days with the decision maker present. And just a bit of advice, what can be helpful during this process is to tell your service coordinator before the IPP meeting, um, tell them what you want to discuss at the IPP meeting. That way, the people from the regional center will know what decisions have to be made and who has to be present in order to make those decisions. And another thing that I'll add that's not on this slide, but if a regional center says that they can't make a decision at the IPP meeting because a committee has to make the final decisions about services before it agrees to put them in writing, you can object to that because again, you have a right to decisions being made at the IPP meeting. And so there should be somebody present that they can help make those decisions on behalf of the regional center. Okay, go to the next slide. Now, a closer look at some services. So my colleague Ali did go over a few services that can be provided to the regional center clients. She also reviewed ways, right, that you can find more information and description of those services, for example, through purchase of service policies or even vendor lists. So in the next few slides, I'll go over a few of these services. Okay, so we'll first start with respite services, which is a service that's provided to various families of regional center clients. We're only going to provide a general description of respite and won't go into a detailed discussion. Some of you may be aware that there may be some changes to respite services in the future, so you may have more specific questions about respite. So we do invite you to sign up for an upcoming webinar that we have on respite services, and that'll take place in about 2 weeks. But you can visit our events page to learn more about that specific webinar. Okay. So let me provide an image description of what's on the screen. So we have 3 children who are seated at a table. They're playing with colorful cups. 2 of the children are being supported by durable medical equipment. 1 child is stacking cups, while another child is reaching for a cup, and the third is watching. And this setting also features a soft blue mat in the background. So now let's talk about the purpose of respite. And again, in a few weeks' time, we'll go over more detailed information in a webinar. But the main purpose of respite is that it gives families a break from directly taking care of a person with an intellectual or developmental disability. In other words, respite services for a regional center client provide temporary relief for family members from the constant care and supervision of a loved one with an intellectual or developmental disability. So these services allow caregivers a break so that they can go to appointments, so they can run errands or rest. And all of this helps to prevent burnout. And ultimately, it supports a family's ability to keep their family member in the home. And there are many types of respite services. Right here, we have a list of a few. And again, in a subsequent webinar, we'll cover this in more detail, but some include in-home respite services, out-of-home respite services, non-medical care and supervision, or respite services in a licensed residential facility, for example. Now let's go over general eligibility for respite services. So first, a client must live with the family member that would need respite from the care of the client. Also, the planning team has to agree that there's a need for respite. And respite is specifically for managing the extra demands caused from a client's disability. And so it wouldn't be used for general parenting. Um, so that's important to note. Also, there has to be an objective in the individual program plan that's developed for the purpose of respite services. So the need has to be documented in the IPP. And of course, another very important requirement of eligibility for respite services is that the client needs more care and more supervision than a person of the same age who doesn't have an intellectual or developmental disability. Okay. Now let's talk about behavioral services, which is another important service that can be provided by the regional center. So let me go to the next slide. So regional centers can authorize the purchase of what's known as applied behavioral analysis, sometimes called ABA, or intensive behavioral intervention services for clients of the regional center. And of course, this is obligated by law. So before I kind of dive into this, I want to provide a short definition of ABA and what's known as IBI. So applied behavioral analysis, or ABA. So the goal of ABA therapy is to encourage more beneficial social behaviors and to decrease or eliminate behaviors that negatively impact a person's ability to function, to learn, or interact with others. Intensive behavior intervention is slightly different, but it's under the umbrella. And it refers to a more comprehensive form of ABA, and it addresses all areas of the person's functioning, and it can be provided in various settings, depending on the person's specific needs. And right, these services can be provided in a one-on-one setting or a small group. So it really depends. And before a regional center can provide behavioral services, right, it has to be shown that the service is not needed for the purpose of respite, daycare, or school services. And so a regional center will conduct a needs assessment to decide that the service is needed in order to improve social behaviors or skills, or to reduce disruptive or maladaptive behaviors. And of course, this would be integrated into the client's individual program plan. And here we have a note for Medi-Cal beneficiaries. So as my colleague Ali mentioned, Medi-Cal is considered a generic resource. So if something can be provided by Medi-Cal, the regional center generally will not purchase that service or provide that service. And so the note we want as it relates to behavioral services, if a person is in a managed care plan, then in that case, behavioral services, sometimes known as behavioral health treatment services, are provided by Medi-Cal. However, if you're in a fee-for-service situation, beneficiaries would be able to obtain these behavioral services through the regional centers. And what I will say is that some of you may be aware, right? But in recent years, there's been a move to place the majority of people in California who receive Medi-Cal into a managed care plan. So most people will fall under that category. But if you don't, know that the regional center can potentially cover behavioral services. Okay. Now let's talk about independent living services, which can focus on independent living skills or supported living services. Go to the next slide. So let me provide a description of the image on the screen. So we have three chefs that are standing together in a kitchen. They're smiling. They're wearing matching white uniforms with aprons, and they're surrounded by fresh vegetables and kitchen tools on the counter. So let's first start by talking about independent living skills. And these are services that are provided to an adult that wants to live independently in the community. And some examples of these skills can include cooking, house cleaning, grooming, money management, shopping, laundry, even some things that normally are not thought about, like self-advocacy. That's a service that would fall under independent living skills. And here we have a link that provides a definition or explanation of independent living skills and also supported living services, which we'll briefly go over in the next slide. Okay, so supported living services. And again, these are not again, I'm introducing it for the first time. So these are services that support people with developmental disabilities so that they can live in their own home or their apartment. So under this service, a client could get help with selecting a home, moving into a home, choosing personal attendants like IHSS providers, and other things. And here we have a link that provides information about what's known as a standardized assessment questionnaire. And this is a questionnaire that's completed by the planning team to ensure that clients receive proper support when they enter into certain living arrangements that would require supported living services. So it asks various questions about a person's needs, about generic resources that have been sought, questions about natural supports that are available, and information about their living situation, right? Are they going to live in a facility? Are they going to live in an apartment? Are they going to live in a home? Will they have roommates? So all of these questions will help determine what supported living services can be provided to the individual. Okay, let me provide a description of the image on the screen. So we have an image of a vibrant park scene with people that are enjoying the outdoors. The sun is setting behind some apartment buildings in the background. Some people are biking along a path, and others are relaxing or gathering on the grass. So here we have a link to a list of the various living situations and services that can be considered for a regional center client. For example, the regional center can connect folks with affordable housing, with residential facilities, group homes, independent living programs, amongst others. So Ali mentioned briefly the concept about the least restrictive environment, which some of you may be familiar with, particularly in the context of special education. And within the regional center context, it's similar. Let me go to the next slide. And next, we'll discuss community participation, work, and day activities. So a goal for many regional center clients is to live independently in society. So part of that is having the ability to participate in your community, to take part in day activities, or to work. These are all goals that everybody has, right? Not necessarily just regional center consumers. And again, this is to allow a person to live more independently and have a better quality of life. So the regional center can help with these types of services or resources. But before we do talk more about these services, let's explain what it means to place somebody in the least restrictive environment. So California law states that services and supports must be provided in the least restrictive environment, or sometimes known as LRE. So a regional center client has a right to services and supports that are close to their home communities and in the same places as people without disabilities. So in this way, clients of the regional centers should be integrated into the mainstream life of their neighborhoods or the communities. So in other words, the least restrictive environment means that services and support should be provided to people with developmental disabilities so that they can live in community settings with their peers without disabilities, as opposed to being, let's say, in a facility that houses individuals with severe developmental disabilities. The goal is to, and if this is a goal of the person with a developmental or intellectual disability to live in the community, then that should, every possible means or service should be provided to allow them to do that. Because, of course, a person should feel included when they're participating in the community, and a person should be allowed to be self-sufficient. Okay. So now let's talk about employment or work, right, as it relates to these services. And let me provide a description of the image on the screen. So we have a group of several chefs who are standing together in a kitchen. They're smiling and laughing. They're wearing white uniforms and hats, and they're in the midst of kitchen equipment. So here we have a list of different employment or work options, and then I'll go through them briefly. So I'll start with competitive integrated employment. And all this means is that a person is allowed to engage in full-time or part-time work in a community setting where the employee works alongside people without disabilities, and the person is paid a similar pay rate to their peers, and the person receives similar benefits. So that's the baseline, competitive integrated employment. Next, we have self-employment, which is pretty self-explanatory. So sometimes people have a goal of starting their own small business, and of course, for profit. So that would be considered self-employment. Next, we have supported employment. And this service provides ongoing support to people with disabilities to help them secure and maintain a job in, again, a competitive integrated setting. So an example of this, let's say a regional center client is hired to work at a grocery store. So a job coach is then provided to that person so that they can work for several hours a day and at the same time be helped with certain tasks like learning how to stock shelves. So that's supported employment. So employment with additional support from others. Next, we have reference to the paid internship program, which is a specific program within regional centers. And so this provides clients with practical paid work experience to help them gain skills and to build their resume for future competitive employment. And under this program, the regional center can cover the wages of the individual and any employer-related costs during the internship period. So an example of this, let's say we have a young regional center client who's interested in the culinary arts. So that person participates in a 6-month paid internship at a local restaurant. They're paid minimum wage, and the regional center covers the costs, covers the wages. So the goal there would be for the individual to gain valuable experience in the kitchen, which can lead to maybe a permanent job offer at the restaurant, or at least a stepping stone to other opportunities of employment. And here on the slide, we have a list to the Department of Developmental Services website that provides more information about employment services that can be provided to regional center clients. Here we covered a few, but there are others. So please refer to that link if you want to learn more. Next, let's talk about day programs. So at a day program, a regional center client, let's say, can learn how to interact with others, express what they may need, and follow instructions. And some day program settings can include development centers, activity centers, behavior management programs, and tailored day programs or services. And the last one I'll explain a bit. So a tailored day service is can be a flexible community-based program that offers individualized support for regional center clients to help them build vocational, educational, and social skills, which of course would lead to more independence for that individual. So it can include things like actual employment, volunteering, or learning, rather than providing a service at a fixed site or in one location. Okay. Um, Something else that I'll mention here at the end of towards the bottom of the slide, you'll see something important that we'd like to note is that these programs provide services on an hourly or daily basis, but are not 24-hour programs. Again, they're going to be for a fixed period of time. And again, this is all determined during the IPP process. Okay. So next, we'll talk about transition services. Um, so I'm going to provide a little bit of context when it comes to special education. So because that'll inform the next slide that we're going to talk about. So in special education, transition services are specific activities in a student's individualized education program that help the student prepare for life after high school. So transition services focus on post-secondary or college education. They focus on employment and independent living. And this is done through skill development and community experiences. Some examples of this can include career guidance and career tests, job coaching, teaching activities of daily living, and other skills. So through these special education programs, transition planning begins no later than age 16, and services are established through the individualized education program. And a student can generally receive these transition services through a school until they graduate from high school with a diploma or until they're age 22 or they're seeking a certificate. And here we have a link to DRC publication that provides more information if you want to learn more. But now let's talk about the regional center's role in transition services. So when it comes to the regional center, there are situations where they may not be able to provide transition services, particularly if there's some involvement of special education. So a regional center would not provide transition services if any of the following apply. All of the following apply, I should say. The individual is 18 to 22 years of age. The individual is eligible for special education and related services, and the person has not received a high school diploma. In other words, if a special education program can provide the transition services, again, think of what Ali mentioned as generic resources, then the regional center can't purchase those services for the regional center client. But as with most things, as with many rules, there are some exceptions to this rule. So here we have some exceptions to the regional center restriction of providing transition services. So if the planning team determines that your needs cannot be met by the school system, then transition services can be provided. Or if the planning team determines that generic resources are not appropriate to meet a person's needs, then transition services can be provided. Or if you participate in employment that includes a paid internship program through the regional center or competitive integrated employment, that's the outcome of a paid internship, then the regional center can provide transition services. Okay, go to the next slide. We're coming to the end of the webinar. And again, in the future, we are going to provide a more detailed webinar on 4731 complaints and appeals. So here we'll only review it very briefly. So if you have specific questions about these processes, we invite you to attend that webinar or to contact our intake line where we can help you directly with any issues. Okay, so let's first talk about a 4731 complaint and the purpose. So the purpose of this mechanism, let's call, is to address violations of a regional center client's rights. Can include denial, abuse, withholding by regional centers or providers. And this is not something that's used to address disputes over levels of service or IPP content. That would be an appeal. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so let me talk about appeals. And when we mention appeals, we refer to fair hearing appeals, which again, the purpose of that is if there's any disagreements that you want to resolve, which is about eligibility, about services, or any decision affecting a person under the IPP. So the difference between the two. So a 4731 complaint is about rights violations, unlawful acts, or a failure to implement prior decisions. An appeal or a fair hearing appeal is for disagreements about the amount, the type, or the scope of services or supports that are in the individual program plan. And here we have a link to a Department of Developmental Services website that provides more information. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact our intake line or please attend the upcoming webinar regarding regional center appeals and complaints. Okay. So here on the screen, you'll see a list of various resources. You can visit our Disability Rights California website. We also have a related program within our organization called the Office of Clients' Rights Advocacy, and they provide direct client advocacy to individuals who are clients of the regional center or have applied. We also have a very important manual that Disability Rights California has developed called the Rights Under the Lanterman Act, which is a plain language resource that provides essentially all information you need to know about regional center advocacy. Here we also have contact information of the Office of the Ombudsperson for regional center clients. So for any issues that can't be resolved right directly with the regional center service coordinator or regional center administrators, you can reach out to this individual. Or if you're in the self-determination program, there's an ombudsperson for the self-determination program, and we have the link to that here. So now, how can you contact DRC or Disability Rights California? Here we have our intake line number, which is 1-800-776-5746. Or if you are unable to call, you can also submit an online form to get help, and we have the link here. And just to let folks know, our intake line is open Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And here we also have the intake line for the Office of Clients' Rights Advocacy, which I mentioned was an agency program within DRC that you can also call. And that number is 1-800-390-7032. Okay. So with that, I think we're gonna take a pause the recording, and then we're gonna go ahead and take some questions that are in the chat.